This episode discusses extreme abuse by family members, including physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. It also covers sensitive topics like abortion and foster care. This content could be distressing and triggering for those with personal connections to these experiences. Prioritize your well-being and seek support if needed. If you or someone you know is in crisis, reach out for help. Call or text 988 or chat at 988lifeline.org. Welcome to It's Your Story to Tell. I am so happy you are here with us today, and I feel very fortunate to have Dr. Sherley here with me today, and I'm really excited for what we're going to be talking about. And the topic today is about turning your pain into purpose. And in this life, we cannot avoid pain, but we can turn to God and learn from it and then use it in helping others. And so thank you for joining me, Dr. Sherley. I want to tell our audience a little bit about you, and your background is long and amazing. So if I have to look at my notes, it's because you have such great experience here. So you're from Brooklyn, New York.
Yes.
And you are of Haitian descent.
Yes.
You are a wife, a mother, you have a son, Jeremiah. And despite many trials that you encountered in your childhood and adult years, you retained your love and your passion for God. You have a mission to spread the love of Jesus Christ through your counseling, teaching, and writing gifts. You're a nurse by trade. Woo woo, go nurses. Having completed a bachelor's and a master's in nursing, you're currently pursuing your doctorate. Girl, I do not know how you have time, but you also have a master's in theology, a doctorate in practical ministry. You're the host of a podcast, an international radio show, A Word with Dr. Sherley, and that airs on all major platforms and Envision Broadcasting radio station weekly, which for our listeners, we will make sure to link all of that so they know how to find you and listen to you, because you are fire and you have some awesome guests that come on and talk about the Lord. You are a certified Christian counselor, specialized in grief, trauma, women's issues, and relationships. You are a 3-time author and international bestseller. I mean, I'm just getting tired thinking about how you have gotten all of this done, but you are a founder of the Beauty for Ashes Global, which is a nonprofit, faith-based organization devoted to women's empowerment and spiritual growth. That is so exciting to me, because that is my goal with the work that I'm doing, is that we can inspire and empower women to take whatever it is that they're faced with and use it for the glory of God. So thank you so much for joining us and honoring us with your presence and your gifts. And so tell us, that's so much that you've accomplished in your life. And I'm sure you wouldn't be on here talking about pain into purpose if that didn't come without some trials. So tell us a little bit about your journey from...
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, Megan, please let me say thank you so much for the honor of being on your platform. I absolutely love what you do. I love your platform. It's amazing. You are transforming lives, and continue to do what you do. You're such a blessing. And I'm really glad that the Lord, allowed us to cross his path. I believe that you're one of those divine connections for me, and that our journey is not just going to be us, being on each other's podcast, but I believe that, we are going to be friends for some time to come. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
And yes, as you were, it's almost every time I hear someone read my bio back to me, I'm like, wow, okay, how did that happen? Because when I look back over my life, I just see I see all the trials. I see the mountains that I had to climb, the hills. I see the valleys. I see the tears. I see the toil. I see the agony. I see all the things that I've had to overcome to get here. Most times I'm not necessarily celebrating the wins. I'm still constantly thinking about what I had to go through to get here. And so let's take you.
That was a good word, because today in my devotion time, I was just praying through a trial and saying, like, Lord, I need your favor. And then I was talking to my mom and I was like, I think I'm believing too small. And I'm wanting God to show up in abundance. And then we started talking about all the things that God has shown up and done. And I was so convicted in that moment, because I was like, you have been abundant. Like, who am I? I'm like sitting here not even acknowledging how abundant you have shown up in my life, because like you're saying, I don't know how I got here. And he reminded me, yeah, that was me. I carried you.
There's no other way. There's no other way when I look back over my life. And as I'm going to take you through, my journey a little bit. I could only, for the sake of time, give you a brief overview, a little snippet of my testimony, because it is so long. It has so many ups and downs, and it just so much. But I tried my best to find the highlights.
All right.
To share. And so here we go. So from a child, my journey, as far back as I can remember, my first real memory of my childhood was just the feeling of being rejected and abandoned by my father, who was physically abusive towards my mother before he officially left the scene. I just vividly remember him abusing her physically and verbally. And so for most of my life, I saw my mother. My mother was basically a single parent. My dad left the scene very early on. And since his departure from the home, probably I was maybe 4 or 5. That's when my nightmare began, because in the absence of my father, like I said, my mother was left to raise me as a single parent. I was the only female in the midst of all my siblings. They were all males. They were all older than me. And you would think, as most people assume when they find out that I'm the only female in the midst of tons of brothers, they're like, oh, you were spoiled or you were protected. Not so. My home was a very, very abusive environment. I experienced verbal, physical, sexual abuse for many of my childhood years. I was molested repeatedly from the ages of 9 to 14 by several men in my family and also friends of the family. As a result of all of those repeated molestations, I was impregnated twice and forced to secretly abort those pregnancies. As you can only imagine, I contemplated suicide until the day when I was maybe about 14. I broke my silence. And this was the day, interestingly enough, my worst abuser, because like I said, there were several abusers, and they lived in my household, multiple of them, many of them. But the worst one, who lived in my household as well, this was a day that he threatened my life, and he said, today's going to be your last day on earth. Right. And he was the abuser that became so obsessed with me that he eventually claimed me as his wife. And he told me if I ever told anyone how he, was abusing me or treating me, that he would kill me. And if I would ever try to leave him also, he would kill me. And so this was a day, like I said, at 14 years old, he told me would be my last day on earth. And so that particular day, he angrily attempted to throw me out of a 5-story, the window of a 5-story building, and almost succeeded, except by the grace of God, the window was jammed shut.
Wow.
And
Thank you,
so
Jesus.
I look back and I know there was God. So the window was jammed shut. He couldn't open it. And so because of all of the commotion at that point, I'm screaming for my life because I'm in a random apartment building that he had basically chased me into. And so with all the noise, neighbors began to come outside to see what was going on. And as he was sort of arguing with a neighbor who was trying to figure out what he was doing with me, I made a run for it. And as I managed to run for it, I decided not to leave the building because he had a car and I had on high heels. I just imagined the scene of him tracking me down much quicker because I wouldn't be able to run fast with the heels. So I decided to sit under the staircase and hide there for as long as I could as I heard him leave the building. And I began to, have all these scenarios in my mind of what my next steps should be, what they would be. And so eventually this led me to knock on a random person's door and tell them everything that had happened, all the abuse that I had endured at home. And they called the cops. The cops came. I told them my story. This eventually led for me to me being taken from home, placed in a group home, then a foster home. While I was in the foster home, this is where I was given my first pocket New Testament Bible. I don't know if you remember those little pockets.
Yeah, I do.
Listen, that little pocket Bible was everything to me because this is my first real spiritual encounter with God. I began to read that Bible and feel a sense of hope, feel that, okay, maybe things are going to get better for me. And, there's a light at the end of this tunnel. And so soon after that experience, I was sent to live with my godmother. And so my godmother is really where everything changed for me. So I had my, like I said, my little encounter with a small pocket New Testament Bible. And now I'm living with my godmother, who is a warrior, prayer warrior, is a woman of God. And she goes to church multiple times a week. I mean, she's at 8:00 service, 11:00 service, Monday night prayer meeting, Wednesday night Bible study. And of course, at that point, I hated it as a teenager and I'm struggling with my trauma. I'm not really understanding this religious thing that I see happening with my godmother, but I had to go through the motions. Everywhere she went, I had to go. And so through her mentorship, she taught me how to be a wife. She taught me how to be a mom. She taught me, how to pray, how to intercede. I mean, all of my spiritual disciplines was birthed, at her home. And so unfortunately, not long after my time with her, maybe a year into being with her, she passed away of cancer. I didn't even know she was sick, to be honest. And so that was another trauma for me because really, she was my everything. She was my light. She was just everything to me. And so, but I thank God that it seemed as though I was her last assignment or maybe her only assignment. I don't know. But I thank God for everything that she was able to deposit into me because, through her, like I said, all my spiritual disciplines. I mean, I was there for multiple services in a week. Then I became very, very active in the church that I ended up being a member at. As a teenager, youth choir, I joined almost every ministry. I just dove in and began to serve until I couldn't serve no more. But I'll say this, while I found Christ at 15, because eventually, at 15, I officially gave my heart to the Lord at one Tuesday night prayer meeting while with my godmother, I can honestly say that I held on more to my religion than I did him. And so I say this because I tried to bury my trauma and all the side effects of my pain behind my religion.
Wow, I think that is so important to highlight that even really positive things like Jesus can be escapes and keeping us from our full potential, which, you wouldn't think like I'm serving the Lord, I'm doing all of these things. How is that bad? But when it's keeping you from going and doing that work of the healing that needs to take place, even something good can get in the way of that. So I am so thankful that you're sharing that.
Yes, absolutely. And so, needless to say, my religion failed me. Okay. So I became very active. And like I said, in church activities, I served faithfully. I was an usher. I was a praise and worship leader. I was a choir member. I was a choir director. I was a praise dancer, a dance instructor, intercessor, then women's ministry leader. Like I said, I did everything that I could. Okay. So here I am serving until I can't serve no more. So while I'm serving, I'm in the ministry, I'm in the church from like 15 on, and it gets to the point where I'm of the age to, be joined to a Boaz, because, at that point, I'm my circle, every young lady, she's believing God for her Boaz, she's believing God for the man that's gonna sort of swipe her off her feet. And then I ended up just like my mother. Okay, so the cycle came right back around. I find myself in the same predicament my mother was in, as a struggling single mother, having been abused physically and emotionally by my son's father. I was absolutely devastated, because you can only imagine those years for me from 15 till 23. They were like my golden years. They were the years that I was just passionately, serving God and believing God for the best possible outcomes, because my childhood was so horrific. The only thing I looked forward to was a brighter day, right? And so I thought that brighter day was going to come with my Boaz. I was going to find. Right. And so did happen. So I didn't find my Boaz with my son's father, ended up a single mother, abused, used, worn and torn, then made a second attempt at finding love again. Okay. With a so-called, because I have to be clear that these were men that were categorized as men of God. They were not, I did not find them in the club. I did not, was on a dating app. Like, these were men that I found while serving in ministry, while on the toil, while toiling for the Lord. I found them, and they appeared to be Boazes, right? They appeared to be everything that any woman of God would want in a man. And so my second attempt, like I said, with this so-called man of God, I did the second attempt only to end up being battered near the point of death. Okay. I was battered near the point of death, while my son witnessed the whole thing.
I'm so sorry for both of you. And not that it's worse or better, but like, when you think someone's safe and you open yourself up and you become vulnerable, and that is what happens. The fact that you have been able to hold on to Jesus is remarkable.
Which is my next point. So after that horrific experience, I made a run again for my life. So I constantly find myself on the run. I made another run, but this time I went straight to the arms of Jesus and not just another man.
Yeah.
I didn't want to cope with my pain. I wanted to heal from it. There's a difference, right? And so oftentimes people run to, it could be a relationship, it could be numbing agents, it could be a counselor, it could be whatever mode of treatment or healing that they think they need, aside from Jesus, because only Jesus can heal, which I'll talk about in a minute. So yeah, I made a decision that I wasn't just going to cope with it. I wasn't going to carry my baggage into everywhere I went.
That's so good. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, feeling like you're reading chapters of my book, like my own personal life. Not that I have a book yet, but because very similarly, I had 2 relationships. There had been abuse in my younger years. There was a family actually, but more so not family. But I didn't feel worthy. And I love Jesus from the time I accepted him into my heart at 5, and I wanted to serve him. But there was something inside of me because of the abuse that was like, I'm second class. Like, I've not saved myself for marriage because I was abused. And so then that makes me less than. And that belief allowed me to attract into my life, even in places of the church, Christian college, like attract people who treated me in a way that was aligned with what I felt good enough for. And it wasn't until I ran to Jesus and worked out my healing and going back into that past that then I was able to see myself like Jesus sees me.
Yes, honestly, it was the love of God that became my lifeline and my saving grace. It took me years to believe that he loved me. I'll be honest. It took me years to get to that place.
There's still days where I'm like, really? Like in this situation and things that I'm praying about, I'm like, why are you wanting to use me? Am I really qualified? And he's like, yes, you're qualified because of this, not because of you, but because of what I put inside of you and how I'm going to use this, and it's like, oh, okay, it's not about me.
Yeah. And so not only did it take me years to believe that he loved me, but also to allow him to remove the reproach of my past, because with every failed relationship, with every, everything that went wrong, it was just an added burden. It was just an added piece of luggage, that it's like I already had all this trauma from my childhood that I really hadn't fully laid down at the cross. I carried it with me all these years into my adulthood, and now my adulthood is giving me its own set of trauma.
Right. Yeah, no, it's like when trauma happens, and then because of the changes that take place in your beliefs, you then find yourself continually re-traumatized. And then, I don't know about you, but for me, that further created my shame that then made, the cycle just then continues, repeats, you pass it down. My kids saw abuse, and I had to run and leave and all of that too. And it was because my kids saw it finally.
Yeah.
That it made me realize, like, what are you doing to them?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't love myself enough at that point to change. But when I saw that they were fighting for me and my son stepped in the middle of it and got it turned around on him, that was it. No more. Like, you can't do that to somebody.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into that part of it, when the abuse turned to him. I mean, that's every mother's worst nightmare, right? To have to watch your, predator prey on your own child and feel so defenseless about it. But that's another story for another day.
No. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, I kept rehearsing my pain over and over in my mind, convincing myself I wasn't lovable or capable of doing anything significant. Again, these are all the things I'm thinking about, even as you were going through my body. I'm like, wow, like most of that time, I felt so unlovable, unworthy, insignificant, incapable of doing anything that was worth telling. And, but despite all of that, God revealed to me that despite the pressures of my life and my fiery trials, that I was still his precious gem. That I was a precious gem in his sight. And I remember the day when God just revealed that to me and through scripture and showed me, just like any precious stone goes through, the process of being refining by fire. but it comes like gold or diamond. When you think about the metals that we treasure, these metals, they have to go through fire over and over and turn over and over. And so this began to really shift my perspective on my pain and my trials. And God gave me another set of lens, because one of the things that trauma will do, it will completely shift your outlook on life. You begin to see everything through the eyes of that trauma until you heal, right? You're not able to see things or people clearly, or even yourself. And so when God revealed to me that I was his precious gem, and that my intrinsic value was attached to my identity in him, but not what I had gone through, this was the game changer for me, right? He revealed to me that I was his masterpiece, and that became my first book was called The Master's Piece.
Oh,
yeah, The Master's Piece.
I love that play on words there.
Yeah, it just, because it was just so, at that point in my life, that was basically what God was really ministering to me. And I wanted to give that to readers, particularly women. That was my target audience. And again, with him calling me his masterpiece, he was basically telling me that I was his masterpiece, rather, that all of my life events would somehow work together for my good. Because one of the imagery on my book is a potter and clay, right? And so you just see a hand representing the hand of God molding this clay. And so he was showing me how, me being pottery in his hand, the ugly moments, the rough moments, the moments where it was fiery, it was messy, I didn't understand, but the whole time I was in his hands. The whole time it was working for my good. The whole time he saw the end result, because God sees the end from the beginning. He declares it from the beginning, right? And so that for me was everything. Once I realized that I was God's masterpiece, that nothing could find itself to my doorstep without going through him, that everything he allowed was for my good and his glory. And he knew how in the end he would use it, which he's doing that today. So
that is so powerful. It's hard when you're going through it and trying to find that heavenly perspective on it, because in the midst you're just but very much like you, when you have that encounter with Jesus and you can start seeing it through his eyes. And, for people who are listening and struggling and feeling like no hope and how am I ever going to be used, and shame and disappointment with your life, I just encourage you to pick up his word and look for things about who he created you to be, because I had to put those verses and the affirmations because I didn't think that way. And so as you're going on this journey and you're recognizing that your thoughts are not the way Jesus sees you, because if they do not align with like the fruits of the Spirit, that's what the Lord gave me, love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, self-control, then you need to delete, deprogram, and put some truth back into your mind. And so finding those words, that you can then remind yourself. And it takes time. Like you said, this is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I think God can heal us overnight, but it's something that we have to work out. God already declared it. It is done, but it's us that keeps us from the breakthrough. And so we have to partner with him. We have to do our work and walk it out, right? And that's the hard part.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of, if I think about my journey and how did I navigate all of that pain? How in the world did I navigate it? Honestly, I can say it was a combination of things, combination of prayer, combination of fasting, worship, praise, keeping myself occupied with the work and the things of God. But even though, like I said, I had buried all of, my trauma behind my religion, but serving in the sense of, taking my eyes off of myself and focusing on others. That was a huge conduit for healing for me, because I was really able, while I was serving, I was able to take my eyes off of my wounds and realize that they were not my my wounds were not my responsibility, but they were God's.
So good. That's like the heading of my website is the wound is not my responsibility, but the healing. I mean, I say the healing is, but that healing is not something you can do alone.
Correct. And so the moment I looked up from my pain, stop looking at my wounds, stop having my little pity party. Why me? What was me? I saw a whole world around me filled with others who were in pain just like me, or in some cases worse. Yeah. And they needed a helping hand. And so God is showing me all these people that need a helping hand. And he's at the same time putting a burden on my heart to help them. Sort of, like I said, helping me to heal through service. That became just monumental for me, right? This allowed me to become a youth leader at some point. I became a mentor, an intercessor, a women's ministry leader, and even a leader in corporate America, because I just had such a burden for helping people and helping people navigate their pain, helping people navigate going from one level to the next. I was all about helping people get to their next place, right? Whether that meant, helping them navigate their pain, helping them just see that God had more in store and never to settle, and always to push to be God's version, to be them best selves, or to be the version of themselves that God wanted them to be, which is always going to be their best selves, right? Yeah. Because most people that I've met had always settled for less than what God had for them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, God, if we read the promises and all that he has said he wants for our lives, we do not access such a small percentage, because it's hard to believe that big. And especially when you've had trauma and you've had pain, because you don't have any comparison to think, oh, that's possible. And then as you begin to heal, as you begin to step out in faith, putting your fears aside, believing about what God has for you, as you continue to do the work, you start to believe more and more like what is possible, because God is unlimited. It doesn't matter what our past is. He can use it. And that's hard for us sometimes to believe. There's days I still struggle. I have imposter syndrome, or I feel like, why me, God? I'm not good enough, or I don't really want to do this today because I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to share my story. I struggle with perfectionism and, wanting to be seen a certain way. And you're asking me to do this?
Wow. And I mean, we could just do a separate session on just the effects of the trauma and the things that we try to hide behind or cover up, or, act like they don't exist. Like earlier today, I heard a live someone was doing, and, she was just talking about her journey with, I guess, imposter syndrome, but she didn't call it that. She just sort of talked about how, in her industry of acting, she would find herself constantly code switching, where she was walking into the room pretending to be someone else before they even gave her a character, because she just felt she wasn't good enough. And I began to think of myself, I'm like, doesn't that sound familiar? Right.
Well, and that's the thing. We're human, and this is part of our nature. And so as we increase our awareness, it's not shame, but the Lord will reveal, like, hey, you're talking down to yourself. You're not seeing yourself the way I see you. You're not an imposter. And it will be brought to your attention, and then you can recognize it, right? Because we can't change what we fail to recognize. And then when we recognize it, that opens the door to just use it, because no one is perfect here. Slash, if you thought you were. I tried to believe that for a long time, and from the outside it might have looked that, and everything behind the scenes was falling apart. So just acknowledging where we are in our journey is so important to be able to then shift the narrative. And God did such an amazing shift in your narrative, and now you are making such a difference. So tell me a little bit how your ministry then came to be, and what you're doing now with your podcast and speaking and books. Like, how did you get there?
That's a journey. It was a journey, but I will say it started, like I said, after, I came to the Lord at 15. So it started really as a youth, me being in the youth choir and just, being around other young people who were like mine, same faith, same heart, same mind. And I began to come into what I didn't know what spiritual gifts were. Mm-hmm. So with all my experimenting and joining it seemed like I joined everything there was to join, every club in the church I joined. And through that journey of just, like I said, being involved in everything, I began to tap into what my spiritual gifts were, and look for ways to intentionally use them to serve others. And so I always had this heart to serve. It didn't matter. I was never a person that cared about titles. I was very, very shy because of all of that trauma. I always thought that I belonged in the back. I didn't have anything that was worth staying up front.
Trauma definitely takes your voice, right?
Yes.
And especially because you're told, keep it quiet.
Oh, yeah.
And so that is so hard to bring your voice forward. Oh,
my goodness. And there's still two of the people that molested me, I still have not publicly aired yet, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm still on that journey of unleashing, my voice and learning how to voice my pain in that sense. And so I sort of developed the sensitivity for others that were, broken and going through their own sort of trauma. And so I found myself realizing that, wait a minute, the one lesson that I learned through all of the things that I had been through was that God was a healer, right? Like, that was the one thing that God taught me. And so while we might, we take medication and we use alternative modes of therapy to bring healing to ourselves, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, ultimately, those things might numb the pain, but it is only God that heals. And so with that understanding that God heals, I begin to look for ways to usher healing into the lives of other people around me. And through nursing, that was easy because literally I would, be praying for patients, praying with staff, and, in the early phases of my journey, of course, with their approval, or if I didn't ask for their approval, I was doing it in my heart, just believing God to bring healing to them mentally, healing to their bodies. It was just it was so powerful. There's so many testimonies from my career on the career front. But then in terms of actual ministry, what I realized was my target audience, although I had a passion for youth because I started as a youth leader, my real target was women, because I realized that everything that I had been through in my life really got me to the place where I could say, Whitney Houston, I'm every woman, right? Because I just literally, I felt like I could connect to any woman. I mean, as a mom, as a wife, as a business executive, as a ministry leader, as someone who had been abused, as someone who had been battered, ostracized, you name it, whatever struggles a woman could have, I felt like I went through it.
Well, the Lord was equipping you through all those things, right? And I really believe the Lord has a special place for women to bring healing to the nation and to break the cycle. We have that power to allow God to, work through us, heal us. But then when we do that, that healing gets passed down. So we have a choice. We can pass down brokenness, and there is so much brokenness in the world. And I do believe, like, right in this time that we're at, that women are standing up and saying, no more, and sharing their stories just like this to say, let's talk about it, right? Because we can't heal what we don't talk about, and it's okay to talk about it. We're going to destigmatize abuse and whatever it is that you faced and the shame so that we can heal it. And so I believe that God is doing something so big in just you sharing your story, the women who come on my podcast, and I hope that it's helping other women feel confident in owning their story so that they can then change it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so coupled with my passion to, be around women, empower women, encourage women, inspire women, I didn't realize that I had the secret passion for traveling, right? So I discovered probably past 5 to 6 years, I discovered my passion for traveling the globe. And I realized that traveling for me, each trip became more and more spiritual, because as I would travel, I would encounter God in ways that were it just always made me not want to leave not want to get on the plane and come back home. Like every time there was something so supernatural that would happen. Every time I got on a plane, I found myself going to up to 11 countries in the past 5 years. And so through all of those trips, what began to happen was God began to give me a global vision for the ministry, and I would find myself interceding for women in Pakistan, women in the Middle East, women in, when I went to Jerusalem, I mean, just all the different places that I went, I would just find myself like having a heart and a burden for the women in those countries, and even countries that I had never been to. I found myself travailing in prayer for them. And so I realized, okay, this is way bigger than I thought it was. And so that's when really God birthed Beauty for Ashes Global, right? Because he began to show me that, what he did for me, which was exchange, my ashes for his beauty, he wanted me to give that same gift to other women and across the globe. And so when I launched the organization, I was a little bit nervous because I was thinking, this vision is so much bigger than me. I literally see myself partnering with women across the globe, but where am I going to meet these women?
Social media?
Listen,
is that God just says,
listen,
I worry about that problem. You just say yes.
Well, yeah. So, but in the beginning, I was like, this doesn't make sense. I was like, let me just stay with my little local ministry and just be happy. But it just would eat me up. And it was like, God was just giving me this vision, like, you're going to have a team, a global team, and the ministry is going to be global. One thing led to another. Now, the ministry, I have a team of women from Australia, UK, Senegal, Nigeria, and Jamaica, and we're still growing. And I'm just like, God, you really did it.
Right. He just needed a willing vessel that he could work through, right? That he's able.
Oh my goodness.
But are we willing?
Are we willing? Yes. And so I learned how to say yes and just trust him to do the rest. And he's been doing it. And so, the ministry, again, we have a passion and a burden and an assignment to reach women across the globe and promote healing, promote soul restoration. We have a heavy focus on outreach and evangelism. We did our first major outreach in Nigeria last month. That was so successful. We fed over 100 widows, women, homeless, ministered to them, encouraged them, and so many testimonies came back that I spent 2 days weeping after that assignment. After that launch, I cried and I cried and I cried, because just to see it, first of all, to see it come to pass with as little resources as we have, because we didn't have that much resources to even launch the project, but had a lot of faith. Didn't have a lot of resources, but had a lot of faith. And I was like, I don't care if we feed 2 people, we're doing this, right? And so we were able to feed, like I said, over 100 homeless families, widows, and get their testimonies. And the testimonies were powerful. And now we're on a mission to keep going. We're doing our next outreach in Nigeria from back to school will be in the fall. Our next country that we're working on is Senegal. We're going to do that next for our outreach. And I'm just so excited about what God's doing.
That is so, when you said that we had little resources, but a lot of faith, God was like, see, that's all it takes is the faith, because I have all the resources.
That's it.
Right? And so how often is it, though, that we think, I don't know, this just doesn't add up? Well, no, it doesn't, because God wants to show up so that he can show off. It's not about what we're doing. It's about what he's doing. And if the resources were there and available, it wouldn't be as impactful. I mean, I think of the feeding of the 5,000, right? It's a pretty amazing story because there were only a little bit that fed and multiplied. If they had had a catering company that could feed 5,000 people, it wouldn't even be a story, right?
Absolutely. And it's just, the testimonies just keep rolling in like daily. God has connected me with women around the globe. They're impacted by, some of them are impacted by, the ground ministry that we're doing. Some of them are impacted by, whether it's books that they've read, podcasts, episodes that they've listened to, or they just see what I'm doing and they're just inspired by all that I'm doing. So it's just, I'm getting so much feedback. A lot of them have me in tears, and I'm like, God, thank you for this. Because, as humans, sometimes especially, we're our worst critics, and we might always see is what we haven't accomplished, but we don't always see what we have accomplished. And so every now and then when someone gives you their testimony of how you've impacted them and you've never even met them, it just inspires you to keep going. And so
how do women get involved in this ministry? And we will put links, but tell us a little bit about how they can connect with you, what they can do to partner with you.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, the best place to go to learn about us and even look at opportunities for volunteering, because we have several volunteering opportunities with the ministry. Because we have such a global vision, we're looking to grow our team all the time. And so the 2 major roles we have are small group leaders and global ambassadors. So global ambassadors can be from any state in the US or any country around the globe. So we have opportunities for global ambassadors. We have opportunities for small group leaders. Right now, the small groups that are getting ready to launch are trauma and crisis, kingdom finances, marriage and parenting, single and saved for the single ladies, and crochet knitting. We have a woman of God. Crochet knitting is her passion. And so we're looking for various ways to get women engaged, virtually connecting, sharing their gifts with one another and growing. So the website where all of that can be found is Beauty for Ashes, and all the words are spelled Beauty for Ashes -global.com.
So amazing. I love that you have these special groups that you can get involved with that are going to connect and meet you where you're at. I think, part of my platform is community and creating community, because you need people to meet you where you're at. And so having a group that you can get involved in and share your story and feel safe because they're willing to share theirs. And, when you do that, compassion for yourself is gained. And I know, for a lot of people who are suffering from trauma, you were talking about being your worst critic. I think women in general, we're hard on ourselves and we're wanting to get it right, and we don't have a lot of compassion. We don't take time to care for ourselves and nurture our soul. And so when we can get in these groups, be with other people, they can meet us where we're at. They can show us compassion, which then allows us to develop our own compassion for ourselves. And we get to show someone else compassion, which you talked about, I've talked about. Sometimes it's a lot easier to do things for others than to do for yourself. But I think in that process of working it out, you learn how to do it, and then it's like it gets reflected back.
Absolutely. And so I love to empower women. I love to help women discover their gifts. And then if I have the opportunity to push them into it, I'll be the one to push them into it. So
yeah, if you're not ready and you need a push, come to Dr. Sherley. She's going to help you just take that plunge off the diving board into the deep end. And we'll all be there to help encourage you so you don't drown, you won't sink.
Absolutely. And for anyone that like just wants to connect with me personally, if you want to like find all like my social media platforms, if you want to sign up to be a guest on my podcast, or if you just want to listen to previous episodes, you can go to my personal website at www.drshirleyphd.com, and that's spelled DRSHERLEYPHD.com.
That's so awesome. And I will make sure that we have all of that information linked, included in my blog post for the podcast, so people will be able to find it multiple different ways. But Dr. Sherley, I am so thankful for you and your willingness to be vulnerable and share your story so that others can be encouraged and inspired to what is possible when they surrender, when they get to the end of themselves and they're ready to say, I need help. That is where God can show up. That is where others can show up and come alongside you, help you find your healing, and then you get to go and do the same for others. And now we're healed people, healing people versus hurt people, hurting people. And I am just so excited for our collaboration, and I'm with you. We are not done. We are only just beginning. And so thank you for giving this time to my audience.
Absolutely. I just want to, with one line, if I was to leave one, line that kind of sums up everything and encourage someone that might be tuned in, is to know that your pain in the hands of God becomes a platform for your purpose. Mm-hmm. So don't run from it. Don't be ashamed of it. Just give it to him and watch him turn it around.
Amen. 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 What an amazing way to summarize that. And you are living proof. I am living proof. If you are looking for more living proof, like listen to my podcast, listen to Dr. Sherley's podcast, because what we are telling you is true. And you can have this same peace and the same purpose and make a difference in the lives of your family, your community, and the nation if you allow it. We are our own worst enemies. We got to step out of our way and let God do what he wants to do. And so thank you for that encouragement. And I look forward to the next time that we meet again.
Awesome. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
New podcasts every Friday. Listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you're ready to start your own transformation journey, visit www.itsyourstorytotell.com. This podcast is intended only for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. The purpose of this podcast is not to replace the counsel of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.